Okay, here is a video. I'm working, I don't know if you can tell, but I'm working a little bit on just one or two courses with some credit analysis. And here's what people want to do in credit analysis, or at least Standard and Poor's and Moody's and all the rest of them. They create these stupid checklists which say, okay, what happens if to the price over time? Are we in a high price where it can come down, a low price? What happens to demand volatility over time? If we put minus 10%, then we get these different cycles. And they all say, oh, we're really worried about cyclical business. We're really worried about technical obsolescence, which obviously I can't spell. And, we're worried about this thing called operating leverage. And so I'm going to try to show you, this is not some fancy forecast that's easy to build into your models, but here's what I find so dangerous about a lot of this, especially this corporate modeling, is you start in the middle of a big economic expansion and you just trend from there because you don't have any real data about, sometimes these days you don't have data going back to 2008, 2009 even, how idiotic that would be. So we're going to show you here the real things that drive prices. And the first is the difference between the short run or variable marginal cost and the long run marginal cost. Now you can say, how in the hell could you possibly forecast those? Well, those are long run marginal cost. I made these other videos that nobody looked at, which shows that, the IRR on a new project. That's long run marginal cost when you make a decent IRR. Short run marginal cost is your variable cost. And the big thing with a whole lot of industries and I'm not talking about just high tech industries, I'm talking about things like airplanes where the cost changed. That's the study we just did last time, or any kind of basic industry where the cost change, solar companies, anything. If you're exposed to technology changes or just new competition from emerging markets, whatever. Demand volatility, if there's no demand volatility, you have limits to all of this. The potential for overbuilding is an enormous one, and anybody who claims you can model this really with Monte Carlo simulation or some kind of objective thing is nuts. How long it takes once you decide to construct until the market becomes into some overcapacity situation is a big deal. And this other thing that we really don't pay nearly enough attention to is the lifetime of assets. If you have a short lifetime of assets, the whole market just dissolves and becomes a new market. It's not so bad, but if you have a really long time market, then you problems. And then there's this reaction to deficient or surplus capacity that's going to be a big deal. Now we're going to show you some modeling issues here while we go through the concepts. You'll never use this again, but you might use the ideas. And just to think about what really drives pricing in different markets. Setting up a choose and a combo box, setting up cycles, computing and presenting demand indices, setting up a table of capacity where you have overcapacity or undercapacity, and using that capacity table to build surplus or deficit capacity. So let's go through some of these. So the first thing I already did this. We made a little thing that says, here's the base case. Here's the short run marginal cost and the long run marginal cost. Now, I have I hope, I have the generic macro. Okay, I was interrupted. I have to restart. So here is the here are the different scenarios for this. Now, since I have the generic macros open, we can press Shift Control C and it'll just show you which are the direct inputs, and we can select this area, press Shift Control 7, and this worked with a choose command. We'll do that in just a minute. And what we're going to do then is we can copy some of these little graphs, I suppose. We'll put this here maybe. Okay, so we'll kind of just have a little I don't know, I hate to use this word, but a little kind of dashboard so we can see the see what happens to the key assumptions. Okay, and okay, whatever. You can see these are the things. You can see how these drive the prices. I'm having fun doing that stupid thing with the whatever. Now we have the next one. We have we're going to make a little graph, and the next input, and I think it's worth going through some of these inputs, is that if we have a different price relative to the marginal cost, so if the price is exactly equal at the marginal cost, we're going to have, no, sorry, let's do this one. This is the how much surplus capacity we have. So if we have, and in fact, what I really should do is move this shift spacebar, shift down arrow, control X, blah, 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 control V, and shift spacebar, control down. Now, if we let's get some of these scenarios. So here's the deal: we have the percent of surplus capacity, and let's make this. So that's our driver. Now, depending on, I can press Shift Control 7 again if you can make one up, I guess, yourself. But if you have different, so if the price is exactly equal, if there's no surplus capacity, in this case the price is a little bit higher than the price is 100%, 110% of the long run marginal cost. In this case, every time the price is exactly the same, so we'll have no volatility. In this case, I don't know why I put it like this. Okay, the price has a relatively low effect. So when the surplus capacity gets really high, the price only goes down this much. And when the surplus capacity really gets low, and notice I put an extreme end and beginning for the lookup function. And then we have a moderate effect where the price goes down to, can be when there's no surplus capacity, the price gets 130%, and then we have a high one where it gets up high. And here I split the surplus capacity into the short run and long run marginal cost. So we can then let's make some scenarios. So let's get the base case, the no change case, where we always simply have it here the same. There's no matter how much surplus capacity there is, we have the same thing. Okay. Now, once you have these, I suppose one thing you could do, let's just do two different ways. We can go to data validation, and on the data validation, we can put in a list, and we can select these. That's one way to do it. Now, a lot of people use this. I saw some Wall Street chaining bullshit that said, "Oh, this is the standard in the industry." How the fuck do they? Whatever. But the advantage of doing of making, I hope I didn't screw anything up by that. The advantage of making a drop-down box, of course, I'll copy this one out, is if you copy this, the first thing you could do is this Q11. Let's just make this, how about number 19? How about we'll make it R19? Okay, and then we can format this, and I've said this so often that it's just ridiculous to say again, but we go to one sheet, back to this sheet, and we select these items, okay? So, and just in case you haven't seen the other ones, we can look at the different effects. Now, when we put the final scenario in, we want to pick this one, but this is, we can't use the index function. So what we can do is put equals shoes and choose, and then this is the opposite from the index. You put your code number in, and you put your base case, no change case, low effect case, moderate effect case, high effect case. Okay, and then you can control D, and okay, whoops, oh, stop it. Sorry, I was just supposed to copy that. Okay, and then, so now you know you need the choose command here because the index function wouldn't have worked with if they're not in adjacent order. Now, of course, I don't give this. I'm not some believer in the index function or anything else in terms of scenarios, at least in terms of finding stuff, maybe. Although you know you have to make your own index match function sometimes. So now we have this thing, and we can also just to make a graph. Why don't we just illustrate this so we can put our SRMC. Now I'm just going to take the first one we had for this one, and then we can LRMC, which is just this. Now this is static in time, so in other words, if this graph, we don't want to change these over time. This requires the same thing. So the price is the short run marginal cost times the percent of short run marginal cost plus the long run marginal cost times this. So you notice eventually it becomes all. And now let's press Shift Control R. It worked because you know I go up in the Shift Control R. I go up. I don't know about. Can't remember now. Maybe 100, but this is the longest kind of thing. So that's the price. And if we want to graph, we want to graph the percent of surplus capacity, and we want to leave that blank, and we want to put that on the x-axis and graph that against the price. So we can go up to this, Shift Control right arrow, press Shift F8 to, that's like pressing the control key. Be very careful with this. And then, because if you don't use the mouse on this one, it will do. So that's our price compared to our cost. I mean, for once I should make a, I guess, add a chart element and put a axis title on the X on the horizontal axis, which is the percent of surplus capacity. Now, now that last one, I'm not. You could do an XY graph with this because very easily, but I'm not going to. I don't want to do this either. Can I? Oh God. Okay, I'm not gonna waste a lot of time on just formatting the graph with you. And okay. That's a little bit small. Okay. Okay. and let's do something like that. Okay. Way too waste of time for you on the graph, but okay. So we can now show you, you know, uh, this. So let's go up and just illustrate what this really assumption really means. Okay. Maybe I'll put it over here for now. Okay, I better put it over here. I don't know where. So if we have a high effect, the base case, we have kind of this, and the no change case, and the low effect, and the moderate effect, and the high effect. So this is like a price curve. You know, other people would have started at high, gone low, but whatever. I had to do this for the lookup function stuff. Okay, and let's make it maybe a line graph. And even, I think, can we format the data series and make it a curved line, okay, smooth line, okay, and that's kind of our price assumption, and let's copy. So now we can copy this to a model, okay, and I'm gonna maybe put that here, okay, and of course, yeah, let's leave it the same size, and what we'll do is save the file just a minute and make it a little bit smaller. Okay, so, whoops, that's maybe a little bit too small for you. Okay, and now we can look at the price scenario here and just put that in. Okay, and so that used the choose command. It had a little bit of, whoops. The main thing I wanted to really show you is just this kind of theory. Now, the next thing that we're going to do is let's just make sure we can do this. So no change case. We're going to put these different prices in. Now, let's make the drivers of the model a red sheet. Okay, and on that red sheet, so now when we press Shift Control C, it automatically runs the macro. So what we really want to do is on this one, the first thing, I think this, I'm going to make this a just a pure, yeah, well, I just did shit. Now, this number should just come from this sheet, okay? And of course, it should always come when you're making a scenario analysis from the choose or the index, okay? So when we put this in, how about, we'll just press the regular percent, Shift Control R, Shift Control C. So when you press the Shift Control C now, it just went over here, and okay, shit, I don't know, it stopped. Okay, I'm not gonna worry about that right now. Ah, shit, I'm gonna fix the Shift Control C maybe, but I think nobody else really does that, so I'm not too worried about that one. Seen somebody else do Shift Control R, which was really depressing for me that somebody else came up with that one, but it's kind of such an obvious one, it's not so bad. I have to make the column width wider. Okay, so let's do the same thing quickly, and I'll stop the video if I end up wasting some of your time. So this is a much simpler case because we just have This time I'll go to the developer tab. We're just going to have this a regular old drop-down box. Now this is, having said that this is the it's easy to do, that the assumption may be the most important of all, and that assumption is that we have, depending on this price to marginal cost, which was just above, we might start building, and when the price gets above the marginal cost, we're going to start, some of them we're going to start building like crazy, other ones we'll build moderately. And what we'll build is, we'll get up to the, this should say new construction as a percent of demand versus supply. Okay, well, I need to change that. And of course, let's put the, go back to sheet and put that in and push this. Okay, so this should say new construction as percent of demand versus supply. No, yeah. Okay, so let's just pick one of these, and of course we just put equal index, and select these ones, and get the F4, and now this, if I press Shift Control R, it does two things wrong. Why not? Okay. Shift Control R, Shift Control P, maybe Shift Control 5. Okay. And so now we have different scenarios. In the base scenario, we just do nothing. I'll call this flat scenario. In the high reaction, we overbuild like crazy once the price is high, and we don't build at all when the price is low. In the low reaction, we build more, but we don't go quite as crazy. How about I'll put this moderate? Okay, and in the low reaction, let's say we build 60%, 80%, 90%, 95%, 100, 105%, 110%, 120%. Okay, so we can make as many cases we want, of course. And then this is this new construction. So we just take this like we did from before. We take this from our assumption sheet. I just press Shift Control R. Oops, I meant Control. Not Shift Control, just Control R. Whoops. Okay. Okay, and then you press Shift Control C again. And I must have something in my counting of columns that limits the columns somehow, and I'm really pissed about that. I have to, I'm going to have to look at that damn program again. That's in generic macros. It's called something like color sheets from tab color or some bullshit. Then let's make the graph and put the graph in here. So we have, again, this time this one, and I suppose I'm going to have to put this over here. And we remember Shift Control right arrow, Shift F8, Shift Control right arrow, alternate F1. Okay, I'm turning the machine off now. I'm just going to make this grow. Okay, now that, so maybe, I don't know if this is, whoops, Control Spacebar, Control B. I don't know if this is helping you, but the idea of this, again, is to show you we've got a price curve. I should call this price curve. Watch it. it just completely, and then we've got some reaction, and we have a little table that shows you in theory, in economic theory, all of the things that really matter. Now, in terms of how how dramatic prices can go. Now, you don't know any of these things. Okay, that's fine. But you know that these things are the things you should be looking at. So let's experiment with this again. If we have a different cost structure, if we have some obsolescence, our prices fall and they're not even cyclical. That's the worst kind of thing. If we have a high difference, if we have some high operating leverage or some high capital cost relative to fixed costs, we can have really high volatility in prices. If we have low fixed costs, and I'm always looking at this graph, we have low volatility in prices. Now the overbuild scenario, if we have just flat overbuild, we have less prices. If we have high reaction, we have a lot of these prices where we just fall to marginal cost. If we have moderate reaction, we have less, it's still pretty bad, and low reaction and another case. So this had less effect than I thought it would. I'm going to put a high reaction in here. No, let's put a moderate reaction. Okay. Now the next thing is we have this graph of the price versus the cost. If we have no change, then who cares? If the price versus the marginal cost stays the same, there's no, then no matter what the demand is, we have a little effect now. And so the price curve, the shape of the price curve, and that's the price curve in which what happens to the price and when costs change, that you can use for oil. Think about oil. Right now, there's for the it's very capital intensive, and the demand has come down. So we went from this high cycle to the low cycle. And you can now the other thing is you can think about a lag. When people build oil fields, they can't just stop them immediately. Now, if there was no lag, all this stuff goes away basically. There's a little bit. If there's a 2-year lag, then let's see, a 4-year lag in construction. Now we'll show you how that works. That 4-year lag didn't work really. So let's put a 2-year lag and a 1-year lag. Okay, so you can kind of see how this works. Now, the other thing I haven't gone through is kind of what happens. I assume that there's a time to we have when we grow, we have 5 years until we fall. So if there are 10 years until we fall, then you can kind of see what happens to the price, the index, and what happens. If we have 5 years, then you can kind of see where we are. Now, what happens if we have 20 years? We still had some reaction. I'll show you why in a minute, because we went through some price cycles. If it's also 20 years of plant life, then we have actually smaller cycles because the demand is not influenced by retirements of existing capacity. So let's put 5 years here, and you can kind of see how the price is changing. God knows what's happening there, but okay. And if we have shorter prices now if we have a longer term asset, let's just leave this in. I'm gonna put some spinner boxes here, I suppose. But if we go to the developer tab, and you want to put a little spinner box in quickly, of course, if it's just something simple like this, we can say we have 1 year, and we can go to I don't know, 30 years, fine. Of course, we go to another one, back to this one. We click on this now. Okay, and you can see what happens if we change the kind of cycles, what happens. and then you can copy this and paste it down here, but then you change the 4 to the 5. Okay, and you can change this and see what happens to the cycles of the peak. And this is the total change over the cycle and the thing. So if we change this to negative 10%, we can see what happens. The demand grows, but we still have some cycles. If we have a 20-year life, then we have much less cycles. 30-year life, even less cycles. Okay, so we can also copy this, okay, and paste it here. And then we have, this is now E15. Okay. Oops. Okay, it seems that the longer the life, we have, what we should really have is if we have a longer life, and let's say we have a big difference between the marginal cost and the low cost, and we have a high reaction. Whoops, I need to change the scale, but we can have these long periods where the price gets down to marginal cost. If we change the life, then we recover much faster, even if we have a big overbuild scenario. And if the price versus the effect. So you can really see what's driving these things. Now, I'm going to, the rest of this is going to be kind of boring, okay? If you're still with me, I'd be shocked, okay? And I just felt like making a video, by the way. Maybe that's why I really did this one. Okay, so I'm going to leave this as 20%, and now I'm going to add in some volatility. Let's add in some Monte Carlo simulation to make it really kind of nifty. Okay, but before we do this, I'm going to show you the kind of how to do the period. Okay, this one I just added the period, but if I press this of EIS, oh shit, this was 115. Okay, that's what we did first. That's just the period. Now this is the first thing I did was I left some time right at the beginning to say, well, you know, we have a little bit of initial period, and we need a little bit of initial period to start the retirements. This is such a pain always to do this. Okay, let me see if I make this initial period. Okay, it didn't really have much effect. Good, but what I do here is just a regular little switch. This is less, so this should have set it like here, and what I should have done is put a little initial period thing here, and you know, maybe this should have been in a different sheet. What the hell? Okay, and this is just, so this is less than or equal to the initial period. Shift Control R. Okay, and if you want this, you can press Shift Control T. Oops. I guess you can't. Yeah, something's going on. Shit. Shift Control T. Ah, Shift Control. Ah, I have a. That's what I have. Oh shit. Shift Control F. Okay, then there's a Shift Control T because I have another file open. I'm not going to talk about that right now. Then we can say, well, here is the up here the peak period, which is I'm going to put time to peak, time to trough. Now, I don't want to open this, but there's a Standard & Poor's file where they said in their big industry analysis, they say PTT, peak to trough, time to trough. So these are these things. Now what we the next thing we really got to make is a counter. Where's my counter? This counter. Okay, I'm gonna kind of space this. Now if it's oh, this is really bad. I'll put, if this is true, then we put 0. Otherwise, then we're just going to make a counter. And we're going to count up, and we're going to do this kind of thing where we say, okay, if, another if, this is a horrible nested if, but I don't know. How about counted period? And then we'll do it in the reverse. We'll say this has to be greater than this. Okay. Okay, and then we can put if the earlier one is equal to our limit, which I haven't talked about. We'll talk about it in just a minute, our limit. But no F4s. Then we put 1, 0. Otherwise, we take the last one plus 1. I suppose I'm gonna make this to 1. I made it Shift Control R. Ooh, just a minute, and I have to take the prior limit this, otherwise I'll have a circular reference. We'll talk about that in a minute. Okay, Shift Control R. Oof. Whoops. I thought I changed that. I thought I changed this to this one. Okay, I didn't apparently. Shift Control R. So right now we have to figure out, when it hit the limit, it went back to 1. And when it hit the limit, it went to 5. When it hit the limit, it went to 5. Blah, 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 blah. And it always had a limit of 5. Now, what we really wanted to do is have a time to trough. I'm going to make this two periods. So we have time to trough. It goes up to 5 by 5 years for them, and comes down. Okay, all right. And what we do is we put a couple of things here. Okay, and we say, well, you know, whenever we hit a limit. Now I see this is what I changed. Let's put all this over here. So the first thing we do is say, are we right now in a peak period or a trough period? And where did I put that? We start with trough. Okay, and then we put equal not. Hope I did this right. Okay, now if we're in a peak period, that means we're if okay, I'm gonna just put this over here. So if it's and this will just make it go back 1 1/4. So we started with 1. So and I should have. Let me redo this. So if it's if this counter is equal to 1, that's when we restart. Then we put not whatever we were in the last period. Otherwise, we just keep it on the same one. And Shift Control R. And then this one is equal to not the other one. So this gives us a simple true or false. So what we do is we go to 5 periods, and then we had no. True. Oh, we had a false, and then we have 2 periods of false. 1, 2, 3, 2, 3, 4, 5 six or five? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 periods of true, 2 periods of false, and this goes the other way around. Remember, I had a problem with this, Shift Control F at least, so we can kind of see which we're in. That's just stupid conditional formatting. I mean, you can do that yourself. I'll just so then this limit is, when this is true, we want to use the 5, and when this one's true, we want to use the 2. So, and that's what I hope you can see why the circular reference arose. We had to go back to the last one, and it was a pain to make it kind of cycle up and down, but that's how you can program a little bit of a cycle into your analysis. Now, I'm not quite finished. So then we can put our changes in demand. We really should make it more transparent, but I'm just going to leave this. This just says, well, if it's no. Yeah, if this is false, then we take the decline and true. Now, and then we say, just a minute. Okay, that wasn't bad. I made this false. What I should have done is multiplied the counter by the false up here. So that turns off the counter until we start here. So it counts from 1 to 2, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That's how it counts. And then I'm calling this industry analysis, and I'll put this in the corporate models, by the way, in the website. And I'm making I'm making the Google Drive. If you got my Google Drive, ask for it again. I'm putting zipped files on it, so it's so much easier to download. Now, on our, not to the capacity here. On the index, we say, well, if this one's true, then take the prior number multiplied by the percent change in demand. Otherwise, if it's false, just take the last number and just don't start the index until you've got a couple of years. So that's going to keep our index flat, and then we can have our total demand. This is from the input, and we have a demand that then goes up and down and up and down and up and down. And now we can look at the demand, and maybe I have, now it makes maybe more sense even. So if we have this cyclical demand here, we can do it like this. If it's smaller, we can see it has a surprisingly low effect on the price, and I have to kind of understand why. There, if we have a low demand, we have much more surplus capacity. We have less surplus capacity here, but if we have, we can kind of see if we have longer term lives, that changes. So, and if we have minus 20%, we can kind of see how many years it takes. Okay, so let's put the volatile demand back up here. Okay. And then now we can put in the capacity balance once we have this. Now we start with the closing balance, as you always do, and then the opening balance is equal to the closing balance. Then the retirements of the existing plant. What I did is I said, okay, let's just take this F4 and divide that by the lifetime of the plant. This is the lifetime of the plant. And we can multiply it by naught, the little not true up here. Okay, so that gives us retirements of the existing plant. Retirements of the new plant is a kind of offset function that I've done so often, but if the period up here is greater than the life, okay, 4, then we put offset, and we go up to how much we added in this period, and we keep it on the same row, and we put a minus on the life. That's the offset function. And let's multiply that by 1 so it doesn't show the falses. Okay, so then what happens is we have 1, 2, 3, should be less than our, how about greater than or equal to. Okay, we have one period where we have this greater than or equal. No, I think I can't, because we have a lag. I have one period, 2 period where we don't have retirements, and this I'm gonna I'm gonna have to think about this a minute and maybe come back to you. Let me just stop this for a minute. Okay, now to make this work, I rearrange things a little bit. So the first thing is you take that demand minus the capacity to see how much extra demand you have. Now, what happens here is you can see how it goes up and down. We when the demand falls, then you have some surplus capacity. Whoops, somebody stop. Okay, so here's the demand now. What happens is we had some retirements of the existing capacity, so we let me see. Excuse me. That's wrong. We put some of the additional capacity. I should have said this. This is we lag it. I said, well, we're not going to put in. If we need this much capacity, which we have down here, this 145, we're going to put this in the next year, not this year. So if you just bear with me, we'll compute how much capacity you need, because that comes from the price. You react to the price to build the capacity. So you get the new capacity, and then eventually you retire it, which is going to be another issue. Okay, and then you get the balance of the capacity. So let me see, we put in a lot more capacity because we had a little bit of a high price. And then let me see, we have some surplus capacity because we put all of this in, so our opening balance is equal to our closing balance. This additions, this comes a little bit later on, so you have your closing balance of your plant. The demand minus the capacity, or it's just really, yeah, this is this, but the surplus capacity is the or the capacity index, whatever you want to call it. I should really call it more of a capacity index, but this goes, so down here, now you suddenly need a whole bunch of, you have this, you suddenly need a whole bunch of capacity of less than 1, so that surplus capacity goes up and down. That's really what causes the price to go up. But then we say, well, okay, let's take that capacity index and just use a lookup function. So you use lookup, of course, tab over, go up to the percent of the surplus capacity, and that's going to determine the price. Tab there and tab here. Now, I am going to scream about something. It would work a whole lot better with the lookup interpolate, but I didn't bother getting it. So that's the same lookup function, we just use a different column. Okay, and then we put the short run marginal cost or long run marginal cost. That depends on the year. Okay, we put a little thing here, remember, with the difference between the long run and short-run marginal cost. That's our little graph here. Okay, so that's just another lookup function. Again, you could use the lookup interpolate. That would have been somewhat better. Maybe I'll make a revision to this with the lookup interpolate, and then we get, so that gives us our price, and we take the price divided by the long run marginal cost, and that determines whether we're really going to build new capacity or not. When this gets above 1, that's when we want to start building a whole lot, because the price tells us to build a whole lot. So we have our price from our overbuild assumption, and then we get our additions. Okay, and this, again, this is another lookup. I'll do a lookup on this. Okay, remember, this is the price relative to the long run marginal cost, and then depending on that price, up here, shift spacebar, and click on that line. I could have pressed shift spacebar again. That gives us how much we add, and then we're kind of around. So we take this number times the amount of demand minus capacity we need. So we're going to overbuild because you know, everybody sees the higher price, so we're going to overbuild. That's kind of the, did I do that right? Hope I did that. Looks like it just changed when I did that. I hope I put that in. Right, okay, and now what I did here, oh shit, the additions can never be negative, so we have to put a maximum cap. We never want negative additions. That's the problem with surplus capacity. That's what I saw happen. So then I took this demand and I just spread it. You can use the offset function here kind of creatively, and you can, instead of having the retirements all, if you suddenly build a whole bunch of capacity, I had a problem. I don't think it's good to just retire them all in 1 year. We want to retire this number over 3 years. So we just use the offset function, and you can look at that when you open the file. It's not very complicated. And then you get the total retirement. So that's the model, and let's do a little more analysis. So again, let's say we have, if we're in the trough, we have a longer time to the peak, and that, you know, you can see what's happening here. I'm not sure. And let's put less volatility. Let's say it's minus 10% here and positive 10% here, and then minus 5%, 5%. That's having less effect than I would really think. And let's say it's got a growth. You know, it still is kind of having the same number. Maybe I have some feeling. I have this funny feeling I have something funny because even a relatively low volatility of demand is causing a high price. Now we've already gone through this. I'm sorry, but you know, this difference between short run and long run marginal cost, or you can call it operating leverage, or you can call it capital intensity, whatever you want to call it, has a very large effect on the market. This, you know, assumption that you can't do, I don't see a great way to do this. This, how people build, how they react once there is a change in the scenario has a big effect. Now, the plant life here, if we have a longer life, if we have a longer life, and then we have negative 20%, 20%, then how about negative 50? Let's make it really big, 50. Okay, and then if you have a longer life with, then you can see these long periods where it just goes down to marginal cost. I need to, we have a decline, maybe minus 40. Okay, and then if you have a shorter life, what it should do is have less variation, less of those long extended periods. See, the longer life is a dangerous thing here. I don't know why. Okay. That's what I'm trying to show. Maybe the simulation isn't working exactly right. These retirements are having some problem, perhaps, but that's kind of the idea. Okay, and I think I might. Oh, this price cost scenario, we better put moderate effect. Oops, percent. I'm sorry. Overbuild scenario. Let's put a high reaction. How about a moderate reaction? And let's put the plant life. And the longer the plant life, the higher the reaction. Okay, and uh, that's the that's enough of this one. Okay, one final thing. If you want to find the where I'm putting the model, I'll put it in. Uh, I'll put in the featured corporate model. And then like I said, I'm going to add some Monte Carlo simulation to it eventually. So I'll also put it in the Monte Carlo page, but I don't know how, that'll be nice and academic, but probably not very useful. And if you order my things, the damn, I put if you order the Google Drive, I put this in zipped files so you can see it much easier. So if you ordered it before, you might want to get it again. I'm going to resend some of this out. Okay. So it'll be in chapter number 1 in corporate models, and I'm going to change this one to well, I'll put it in historic. I'll put it in advanced valuation issues. Why not? I think it's a pretty advanced valuation issue. Okay, so that's that.